Let's call the meeting to order. Rock Valley College Community District 511, Committee of the Whole meeting, August 13th, August 12th?
13th.
13th, sorry, August 13th. May we have a roll call, please?
Gorski. Nelson. Padilla.
Here.
Kennedy here. Michaels. Simpson.
Here.
Gorsy's walking in right now.
Hotel.
Here.
Trojan.
Here. Okay.
We have enough for a quorum.
Okay, do we need I don't think we need a member by other means than physical. John is in Norway, and at this hour, he's probably sleeping because they're 6 hours ahead.
I want to go to Norway.
Any communications and petitions, public comment?
No communications or petitions.
Thank you. Any recognition, any visitors to be recognized?
We will have one visitor, but Ellen will recognize her. And other than that, we want to welcome Aaron Cassell, our attorney of record from Robin Schwartz, here this evening.
Good, thank you. Review of the minutes. Any comments on the minutes? I want to remind everybody the meetings are being streamed and looked at, so smile every once in a while. Okay, general presentations, and I'd like to turn it over to Ellen to introduce our speaker.
Yes, today Tammy Schmallow, I'm sorry, from PMA is here to present about the financing plan for capital projects.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. Hi there.
Welcome.
Thank you
Welcome
very
back.
much. I'm going to start taking you through the presentation. I appreciate Araceli being my driver tonight.
You
So,
got to get closer to the mic. It's a little hard to hear.
is that better?
Yeah.
Raise it up.
Hanson.
Little help.
Let's do that. You do.
It's an important talk, so I want to make sure we all hear.
How about now? Is that better? Okay, thank you. All right, so I will take you through the presentation. If we go to the next slide, please. I first just wanted to, before we get into the college's financing plan for various capital projects, I wanted to look at the existing debt that the college has. So this is a chart that's showing your outstanding debt service or principal and interest payments on your existing bonds. So if we look at the line shaded in yellow, that represents levy year 2023, or the current fiscal year. The college is making those debt service payments on bonds. So you have 3 series of bonds outstanding from 2015C, 2022A, and 2022B, that in total, the debt service payment that was levied for levy year 23 was just under $12 million, that $11.98 million amount. So against your equalized assessed value of your EAV of $7,855,000, that results in a bond and interest, or BNI, tax rate all the way over on the right-hand side of about 15 cents. So the tax rate, the total tax rate of the college, you know, within that is the BNI, as we call it, tax rate. So when you see your property tax bill, that tax rate is part of the total tax rate. It's not segregated on that tax bill. But more importantly, if we look for the next couple of years, so let's look at that fourth column from the right, where we had the $11,981,000 figure. You'll see for the next couple of years, the debt service payment's about $12.1 million before it drops off with that much smaller payment in levy year 26. And I know many of you have been on the board for a while and were part of the goal to have a debt service payment of around that $12 million figure for quite some time. If we go to the next slide, this is just a graphic view of the same information, just so if you want to look at it this way, again, you can see the outstanding debt service payments of the college are pretty level at about $12 million through levy year 2025, and then there's the drop-off coming in levy year 2026. So if you did nothing as a college, these are the remaining payments that you have on your debt service.
Would be debt-free.
Correct.
I like the words, debt-free.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide, because as we think about the projects that you are undertaking, think about putting together a financing plan, there are several things that we need to think about, several variables that can influence what the right financing plan may be. So the first thing we want to look at is the estimated construction draw schedule, particularly for the downtown campus, because it's a sizable project, and there are certain rules, bless you, under what's called arbitrage rebate. I'll define that in a minute, requirement per the IRS that we sort of tie those things together and ultimately can impact a decision about when to sell your bonds and how many series or individual issues of bonds you might sell. Then we also, of course, want to talk about where's the bond market right now, what interest rate risk might there be, and then we will ultimately have a recommendation at the end based on where things stand right now for when you would sell bonds and the number of bond issues as well. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So just sort of setting the stage in terms of what we're looking at financing, of course, is the Classroom 2 building and the Health Sciences Center. You have already started looking at some of the required legal documents for that $14.7 million working cash bond issue that's in process for this fall, and we'll look at a timeline for that at the end of the presentation. And then again, you have the downtown Rockford facility with a project cost of just under $50.8 million. And those would be funded through what we call debt certificates to a funding bond transaction. And I'll talk a little bit later more about what that means. It's essentially a two-step financing approach that the college has gone through before to fund major capital improvements. Okay, so on the next slide, let's talk about arbitrage. What does that mean? So when you as a college sell bonds for capital projects, you are getting the benefit of federal tax exemption. So that means that investors who buy your bonds do not have to pay federal income taxes on the interest earnings that they make while they hold your bonds in their investment portfolio. So the federal government doesn't love that because they're not making money when you sell tax-exempt bonds. So it's a privilege to be able to do so. So there's some rules that are put in place. And one of the first things is when tax-exempt bonds are sold, something is called an arbitrage yield is established. And that arbitrage yield is important to the IRS because it's basically saying, hey, college, if you want to sell bonds, you certainly can, and you can invest those bond proceeds because you're not going to spend all the money the first day that you get it on your construction project. So they say, we're going to limit the amount of interest earnings that you can make and limit it to that arbitrage yield or that rate that's established through the bond sale. Okay, so it's basically anything above that rate. So for example, if you sold bonds at a 3%, but you can invest at 4%, that 1% spread or difference, that's called the arbitrage rebate. And the federal government wants that back from you unless you can meet certain exceptions to the rebate. And there's two listed at the bottom. One's called a small issuer exception, which I'll define in a minute, and the other one is a spend down exception that may be available to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so basically, they don't want you to make more money on the money they loan to you.
Exactly.
And if you
right.
do go over investing, then they want it.
They want it back unless you can meet certain exceptions.
Right, okay.
Yep, got it. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So, as I said, they're in general going to limit how much you can earn, but one of the first exceptions to arbitrage rebate is called the small issuer exception. So if you as a community college issue up to $15 million of tax-exempt debt in a calendar year, you can earn whatever interest you want at whatever rate you'd like during your construction project. Okay, so but it is a limit per calendar year, so every January 1, you get a new reset on that $15 million limit. If we go to the next slide, before we talk further about the other exceptions, the spend down exceptions, I want to talk about the reasonable expectation test that you have to satisfy for every tax-exempt bond issue that the college enters into. So as you can imagine, when you sell tax-exempt bonds, again, that's a privilege. The IRS wants you spending those dollars, putting it into the community, investing in your infrastructure, creating jobs, and doing good things for the college and the community in general. So when you get your bond proceeds, you as a college have to satisfy a couple reasonable expectation tests. The first one is you have to have a reasonable expectation to spend or contractually obligate yourself to spend at least 5% of the bond proceeds within 6 months of issuance. That's usually a pretty easy benchmark to meet because you can include things like professional services fees, architects, for example. The other key expenditure expectation, though, is the 85%, a reasonable expectation to spend that amount within 3 years of issuance. Okay, and along the way, you have to spend the money diligently. You can't, spend money on projects for 6 months, have a dormant project for 18 months, and then hurry up and meet that 3-year reasonable expectation test for the 85%. You need to keep working on the project all the way, okay? And during the first 3 years, it's called the temporary period, you can actually earn as much interest as you want. Go ahead and invest above your arbitrage yield, and if you don't meet one of the exceptions, then at the end of the transaction, you've finished the project, all the proceeds have been spent, then there's a calculation to say, does the college owe money back to the IRS? Okay? All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so after the 3 years, let's say you still had some proceeds left over. What if you didn't meet the 85% test? Because that sometimes happens. There can be supply chain problems or weather disruptions. All sorts of things can happen to a project. So what the IRS says is, after 3 years, if you haven't met that 85% test, you are limited in the types of investments, and you are limited on the rate. You're limited to that arbitrage yield, again, for that example we talked about a couple minutes ago, at that point. So the IRS at that point would say, no more going above that arbitrage yield, now you're limited until you spend the rest of that money, okay?
So in a 3-year period, if you invested some of that borrowings at 4%, and then the second part of the 3 years, markets crash and you only got 2%, would they each balance each other out? Would it net out?
Potentially, yes, but we'll talk about the spending exceptions, because that's really kind of what we're getting at, is
okay.
Can you meet the spending exceptions? Because yes, you're right, if you could, yes, at the end of the day, it would all blend together and it would be counted really as one pool of investments.
Thanks.
Okay, so we go to the next slide. All right, so here are the spend down exceptions, and it's in essence, again, kind of rewarding the college for spending the money diligently on the project. So what it says is, if you can meet one of these spending exceptions, you can keep that arbitrage, that positive, that spread, that 1% spread in my example, you can keep it for your project or other purposes. So there's a 6-month, an 18-month, and a 2-year opportunity. The 6-month, as you can see there, you have to spend 100% of the proceeds within 6 months. That is pretty rare to meet that spending target. That's a pretty accelerated financing timeline, so that wouldn't work. There's an 18-month where you have to spend 6 months within, 15% within 6 months, 60% within 12 months, and 100% within 18 months. That may be an option. And keep in mind, for both the 18-month and the 2-year exception, you have to meet every single target. You can't make the first one, miss the second one, and hit the third one, for example. And then there's the 2-year exception, where it also incorporates, by the way, into the calculation, you have to include the interest earnings you're making along the way. But you can see what the spending targets are there, what you have to meet for every single 6-month benchmark to meet the 2-year exception. Okay? Yeah.
So if you don't, meet like 60% in 12 months, the IRS will like cap it and like limit what you can do with that, correct?
They'll say, you're going to have to give us all of that additional 1% in my example. We're going to need all of that back from you when you're done with the project,
Okay.
essentially.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. Okay, so in looking at the very recent draw schedule that we've had a chance to review, the downtown facility project would be completed by October of 2026, so a pretty rapid spending plan overall. But then we looked at, again, we didn't look at the 6-month because we knew that was impossible, but we looked at the 18 and the 24-month arbitrage spend down exceptions, and the college, based on that spend down schedule I just mentioned, and assuming it issues debt certificates, all of the entire sum of money that you'd need for the project, that you would be able to meet the 24-month rebate exception test if you issue the debt certificates in April of 2025, okay? So you can see the exception test dates listed on the left, the required spending target, and then the district estimate. So you're actually well ahead of what the benchmarks are for the IRS. So there's really good confidence that you could meet that spending exception if you follow the spending plan that's been set forth so far. And that's important
So
because,
you can make money.
I'm sorry?
So you can make money then? if
Yes, you can keep the
meet
arbitrage
schedule here.
rebate. And I'm going to quantify for you in a minute our best estimate of what that might be. Yep. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, so let's shift for a second and talk about the bond market. We've talked a little bit about arbitrage and the spending plan for the big downtown project. Let's talk about the interest rate market. So there's a couple things going on this slide. The gray shaded area is showing you what the Fed has done with interest rates since January of 2020. The different colored lines are different points on the yield curve for what's called the Municipal Market Data Index, or the MMD for short. So as a community college district, your bonds sell at a spread to or relative to the MMD, just like any other community college in the country when they sell tax-exempt bonds, or any governmental unit that sells tax-exempt debt. So we care very much about the trends in the index. And we put it on top of the Fed's history with short-term interest rates, because a lot of people think the only thing that influences the tax-exempt bond market is what the Fed does. There's some truth to that on the short end of the yield curve, like if you sold a 1-year bond or a 3-year bond. When you start to get longer, there are other variables at play, okay? So let's look at the gray shaded area on just the right-hand side. We know since early to mid-2022, the Fed started raising interest rates after it being flat for so long. And they were in that rising interest rate environment for quite some time until things started to flatten out kind of the middle of 2023. And they've been in a holding pattern, but we know that they're talking about lowering short-term interest rates as soon as their upcoming meeting in the middle of September. But what's interesting is if you look at the different colored lines on top of the Fed activity, you can see that for 2023 and into 24, it's not followed the same pattern as what the Fed has done, right? So they've been up and down at different points, and that's really because at different times, the bond market thought that what the Fed was doing to curtail inflation was starting to work. So if at some point it was crazy expensive to buy a carton of eggs a couple years ago, and then that finally came back down, so the bond market got excited, but then something else would come out like gas prices still being too high or expensive to rent an apartment. Then the bond market interpreted that to mean, well, it's not working, they're not getting inflation under control. So that's why we've seen more of the up and down. So we are going to listen very closely to what the Fed says, obviously in about a month, but in between that, there are CPI reports that come out, there are monthly job reports that come out. In fact, the jobs report that came out about 10 days ago now was much more, I say, disappointing for some people than probably expected. That has a good impact on the bond market, meaning rates came down quite quickly over the course of just a couple days. So when there's kind of that sort of bad news, the stock market doesn't like it, and the stock market drops, the tax-exempt bond market rates go down. That's good for you as a college when those things happen. So we're going to continue to watch those things closely as it will impact your financing, but know that where rates are right now in the bond market, they're right on top of the 25-year average. So you're not at the lowest point of the lows, and you can see where the lowest points in history were in 20 and 21 right after the COVID pandemic took hold. They've been coming up, but again, we're right at that average. And I'm hopeful that by the time you maybe enter in the market with the working cash bonds for the classroom 2 and the health sciences building, we may see some lower rates. And I'm also hopeful that by the time you do financing in 25 for the downtown campus, that you may see lower rates. They won't be as low as what those historical rates were in 20 and 21, but they still could come down somewhat depending on the variables that I described. Are there any questions about the market? Yeah.
Okay, so the first draw we're going to do is in November, and of course, I hope you had a chart showing your predictions going forward, especially in this political presidential election year.
Yes.
What do you think the rates would be, up or down?
Sure. So
under each scenario?
historically, after a presidential election, regardless of who gets elected, interest rates in the bond market do tend to go up. The question is to what degree. So that we'll just have to wait and see. But knowing that the Fed is now talking about lowering interest rates in September, potentially by not only 25 basis points or 0.25%, maybe as much as 0.5%. And then they've said they will consider doing it again at some point later in 2024. The Fed meetings after September are November 6th and 7th, which is right after the election, and then there's another one in mid-December. So there are those kind of conflicting variables going on, with rates typically going up after a presidential election, but the Fed also taking action, potentially lowering rates. Those things may cancel each other out to some degree. But I will also tell you that as we see the jobs reports, the unemployment reports that come out every month, if the bond market thinks that the Fed is going to start lowering interest rates in September and later this year as predicted, the bond market will start to bake that in. It will start to lower itself before the Fed may
Before the
officially
Feds
take
do.
action. So we could see some of these things just sort of counterbalancing each other. So I don't have a great answer for you in terms of what rates will do after the election. I think they'll go up. It's just a matter of by how much and how quickly. But they tend to settle down right after the first of the year.
Paul?
Yes.
Hi, yes. So regardless of the, the election cycle, what you're really looking at is at least one rate reduction, maybe two before the end of the year. But your overall goal is, and you mentioned it once or twice already, at the 25-year average or lower. You're not,
Yes.
rather than taking a look at this chart and say, oh, I wish we could be down here. We'd be
Right.
good enough if we were at the 25-year average or
Right.
lower.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Well said.
And so given that, even if after two rate reductions possibly, it goes up again, what would you expect it to be at within that 25-year
Yeah,
average?
I would think so,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
Did you
Yes.
say that you wanted interest rates higher for us, and that would be better for us, or lower interest rates would be better for us?
Well, from a borrowing perspective, we want lower interest rates, for sure. But on the other side, looking at the investment of the bond proceeds, and we're going to look at this a little more closely in a second, of course, we like somewhat higher interest rates, but you can't have it both ways,
So
right?
kind of in the median.
So if the Fed starts to cut rates, right, that could be a good sign for the bond market because it anticipates they're getting inflation under control. But that means your investment rates may come down, which I know Ellen watches very, very closely. So that could impact you on the other side. Can't have it both ways.
Double-edged sword.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so let's go to slide 13, if we could. So there are two financing scenarios we prepared for tonight, and then I have a recommendation based on where things are right now for you going forward. So in both scenarios, we incorporate the $14.7 million working cash transaction that will be used for the Classroom Building 2 and Health Sciences Building project we talked about. And then we have one scenario where you sell all 50.8 million roughly of the debt certificates to the funding bonds. We do that in 2025. So you get your debt certificate proceeds in April of 25. We turn around and sell funding bonds, and that transaction closes in August of 25. But in the second scenario, we break up the sale of the financing for the downtown project into two transactions. So we do most of it, about $36.5 million in 25, and the balance in 2026. And there's a reason for that. It's to try to help you, if we need to, meet one of those spending exceptions, those targets, or that $15 million limit. Is there further benefit to the college by breaking it into two series? And I'm going to show you the math in a second, which will help articulate that. Okay, so on the next slide, these are numbers. I apologize, these are very small on the screen. But the chart we looked at initially, the same information with two new columns. So the green column is showing you the estimated $14.7 million working cash bond issue, next to the blue column, which is issuing roughly all $50.8 million that you need for the downtown project. And the goal is to try to minimize the impact on that debt service payment. So again, we talked about how it's been around $12.1 million for several years. The college also has a history of paying its debt off relatively quickly. So it minimizes its interest costs. So incorporating that into our plan as well. We would do that. This financing in aggregate between the two transactions would be paid off in levy year 2031 or fiscal year 2033. Okay? And that annual debt service payment, though, would go up to about $14.5 million. It increases the bond and interest tax rate by about 3 cents. Okay? If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide for a second, it's another bar graph of this same information for the debt service payments. So the green bars are the working cash piece, and the blue bars are the roughly $50.8 million for the downtown project. okay? And everything would stay at about $14.5 million through levy year 30, and that final payment in 2031 would be much smaller. And depending on where the market is, when we actually get all of this done, that final payment in 2031, that's going to be something different. It's either going to be hopefully a little bit less, it might be right on top of what we're estimating, but that's the payment that would likely change, because our goal is to have that maximum payment now be about $14.5 million per year. Everybody follow that? Okay. If you want to go to the next slide, very, very similar, but now we have two blue columns. Because in '25, we'd sell about $36.4 million of the roughly $50.8 million that you need, and then you'd sell the balance in 2026. But the picture, even on the next slide, is going to look very similar to the one that you just saw. That bar in 2031, the height is a little bit different in aggregate, but it's still a pretty similar story. So we should probably look at the summary chart. I think that will help to really understand how are these different. So on the next slide, so for scenario 1, starting at the top, so in both scenarios, you can see the December 24 working cash bond proceeds are about $14.7 million. As I mentioned, that's common for each scenario. In the scenario 1, we generate the debt certificate proceeds for the downtown project, all of it in April of '25. The estimated debt service, or that principal and interest cost over time, is about $79.4 million. The estimated interest earnings, though, on the full $50.8 million roughly, is over $2.1 million. And that's assuming the government lets you keep all of it, because you are going to meet the spend down exception that I described earlier. You can meet that 2-year spending exception. So when we subtract that from the debt service that you're paying, your net estimated debt service cost, less those interest earnings, is about $77.3 million. Okay? Now let's look on the right-hand side to the scenario 2. Very similar, except, again, we're breaking up the proceeds that you need for the downtown project into 2 transactions, one in April of '25 and one in March of '26. Okay? So we look at that. Remember that you can issue up to $15 million in a calendar year, tax-exempt debt, and be exempt from that arbitrage rebate. So the $14.4 roughly $1 million amount in March of '26, that can earn as much interest as it wants. But the $36.4 million, that one can as well, because we're still being aggressive about the spending. Okay, but the gist of it is, because you're not going to have all $50.8 million invested as soon as April of '25, you're not going to earn as much interest. You're not going to pay as much in debt service, though, either. So let's look at that where it says estimated net debt service. So it's just under $78.9 million for scenario 2. You see that's about $500,000 less than in scenario 1. And that's because you're not issuing all of those debt certificates in April of '25. You're waiting to issue $14.4 million of it until March of '26. Okay? But on the flip side, you also don't get to invest for as long, the same amount of money. So now your estimated interest earnings are only about $1.5 million. So when you subtract that from the debt service cost estimate, now you get a figure of about $77.4 million. So your net borrowing cost in scenario 2 is actually higher than scenario 1. And that's based, again, on where interest rates are now, both on the borrowing side and on the investment side. Does everybody follow that? Any questions so far? Go ahead.
So back to your 2 bar charts and the little table. Both of them look almost identical.
Yeah.
Identical.
Yeah.
And the debt service, 14.5 on both, and the levy year 2030 on both.
Right.
The only little difference is on number 2 is the last year is a little bit less. But otherwise, they look identical.
Right, yes. So it really comes down to the difference in the debt service cost is only $500,000
Yeah.
between the 2. But then we factor in the interest earnings piece to say what would be more beneficial to the college, factoring that part in.
Right. Well, also the shorter time period
Yes.
lowers the risk of an extended, multiple drawdowns of interest rates going up over here.
Right. That's
So
true, too.
you-
Yes, yes,
Shortening up the risk.
yeah.
Paul?
Well, I think they're trying to balance out the income versus, the overall, expenses on it. And I was just going to wait till get your recommendation, but to me, it seems like it's contingent that the project gets finished on time.
Yes, that's important.
Project not getting finished on time would screw up this
It would
whole
change this
thing.
analysis,
Yeah,
right,
okay.
right. You wouldn't earn as much interest.
So I'll wait till your final recommendation to
Sure,
ask another
yeah.
question. So.
Yeah, that's okay. So if we go to slide 19, it teed it up beautifully. The recommendation as of now is to proceed with scenario 1, sell all of it in April of '25. But I acknowledge it's August of '24. And what you're going to see in the financing timeline for the downtown project, that doesn't start until early '25. We've got about 5 months comfortably where we can see what happens in the market. So if the Fed does cut interest rates and that impacts the investment side, it likely will have a bit of an effect on the borrowing side, and all the other things I mentioned with the jobs reports and the CPI, your borrowing rate could be less. We'd like to come back to you right after the first of the year with an updated recommendation. I could have a different recommendation then. I might have the same one. But it's too early at this point to say this is absolutely what you should do. But at this time, we think scenario 1 is the right choice.
So if you waited to April 25 with part of that, the big one, and split it up, if the interest rate outlook looks like it's going to keep dropping, then
Yeah.
you split it up,
Potentially.
push it out.
Potentially,
Okay.
yeah. So we wanted to show you what we see right now, if you had to make a decision right now, but you don't. So the good news is we can see where the market is in another 4 or 5 months and come back to you.
But no matter what, come December, we're talking about the working cash bond.
I was going to say, yes, if we go to slide 20, in either scenario, you are moving ahead with the working cash bonds, the 14.7 million, selling all of that this fall. So I wanted just to share with you a very high-level timeline to know what's coming. I know you've already adopted a reimbursement resolution at your July 23rd meeting, and on August 27th, you would adopt a resolution to call, it's called a bond issue notification hearing or a BINA hearing for those working cash bonds. You'll have a public hearing, much like you have your hearings for your budget and your tax levy every year. Then a notice goes in the newspaper about the hearing. You have the hearing at your September 24th board meeting, and then at your October board meeting, you approve a resolution to actually sell the bonds. That's the last legal step for the board. And then at this point, we anticipate being in the market by the end of October. The parameters resolution gives some flexibility, though. It doesn't tie you to a particular date and time, and given all these variables that are moving right now with CPI and unemployment and the Fed and the election coming, at this point, we would like to plan to get you in the market before November 5th. But if for some reason we get some information that tells us maybe we're better off waiting, we can do that. But yes, per this timeline, we would have you in the market at the end of October and actually get your proceeds by before Thanksgiving. But again, those couple dates could move a little bit depending on what's going on at that time.
Paul?
Thank you. So the common element between scenario 1 and 2 is that we've got the working cash bond.
Yes.
That you're advising us to move ahead with.
Yes.
At breakneck speed. So now my question is kind of in advance of the operations committee report, but when would you expect classroom building 2 to be, does the completion of Classroom Building 2 and Health Sciences Building project under the working cash bond proceeds affect any of the financing for scenario 1 or 2?
No.
Does it?
It does not.
Okay.
Does not.
So, Classroom 2 and Health Science Building project, just ballpark target? Yeah.
Microphone.
Well, what I'm concerned about is having the 3 big projects kind of all happening at the same time and just making sure we stay on schedule with the one that may cost us if we don't, finish it, the big one downtown, so.
So as far as the HSC is concerned, that will be completed by next summer.
September 1st, 2025.
Yes.
Okay.
The only concern is there may be a delay in the actual elevator itself, but it should be somewhere.
Yeah, we had to wait a year for an elevator. I can understand that, so.
So, but that's the projection right now. The projection is also that supply chains are caught up now, supposedly, from COVID. We'll see. So that one, as far as CL2, this is a best guess. They're picking an architect right now. Once we get an architect, you figure there's a year of programming with that architect. So that puts us out till August of 2025. And I figured 2 years for construction, so you're August of 2027.
So we have one building finishing up, hopefully, let's say September of next year.
26. Oh, well.
25, and then another one, the big one downtown in 26, another one wrapping up in 27.
Yeah.
If everything goes on schedule with the architect, and I know you're waiting on other agencies and stuff for that, so it is a ballpark.
The HSC one in the downtown, we're pretty solid on those.
Okay.
As far as the CDB project,
Right.
all I can say is it's a CDB project. So.
Okay. So in terms of the working cast bond, I'm fine with, and I'm fine with scenario one. And I'm fine with that schedule. Got something at the end of 25, or before the end of 25, a quarter, 26, and 27. It'll keep you busy. You got job securities, but there you go.
That is true.
So, but I'm fine with all that plan, so.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
No, very thorough.
Thank you.
I like it.
Can we peek at
just, I
slide
don't know,
21 for just 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
That is the timeline for issuing the debt certificates to funding bonds in 2025. So regardless if you sell all of it or just portion of it, like we looked at in scenario 2, for example, we would start with this timeline, meaning the board would be asked to approve a resolution for the sale of the debt certificates at your February board meeting. And I won't bore you with all the details after that. I know you can read those, but it leads up to, once you get those debt certificate proceeds for the project, then you turn around to issue the funding bonds, which pay off the debt certificates, and you move those debt service payments to the tax levy, which you saw in the financing numbers that I showed you. So just wanted you to see, kind of from start to finish, what that looks like. And as I mentioned, we don't have to make a decision right now on scenario 1 or 2 in terms of the downtown project, because we're not coming back to you till February to legally start the process. So I would anticipate right after the first of the year, we'll update the analysis and come back to you with an updated recommendation.
Sounds good.
Any other comments or questions?
No, sounds good. I'm good.
Okay, thank you very much, Tammy.
Thank you.
Just for newer board members, Tammy's been with us, how many years doing this with us?
I think it's about 10 now,
10 years, so she's
but I haven't gotten older.
Been through a few financings. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job. Thank you. All right.
Okay, next item is to the Teaching and Learning Communications. Trustee Simpson.
I'm going to turn it over to Heather Snyder.
Thank you very much. Good evening, trustees. There's been a change, as always, in enrollment since the report was sent out. I am pleased to say that it's improved. As of this morning, we're 93% to budget and 90% to the stretch goal. To give you a little bit of background about what goes into those numbers around this time of year, we've already had the major decreases that we have with the drop due to non-payment. We've had the decrease typically associated with canceling courses that are low enrollment, and we're working to get those students into other courses, also working to get students re-enrolled who were not registered due to non-payment and get them on payment plans, and reaching out to other students with offering walk-in registration events for them and also scheduled registration events at this time. We do know that we'll also have late start after the semester starts. Regular classes start this coming Saturday, and then we'll continue to enroll people in late start classes. And also, we're still expecting some of our dual credit registrations to be added to this number as well.
Okay.
I got a couple questions.
Yes.
Do you notice any kind of ups or downs within different categories of enrollment?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Secondly is, what did we finish up with last year in terms of actual credit hours?
52.4.
No, for the whole year.
For the whole year, we met the goal.
115.6, so your budget this year is 5,000 lower,
Approximately.
which is okay. That's Ellen's doing there, I think. All right, any other questions? If not,
I think I'm trying to think, okay, classes start Saturday.
Yes.
Is there a time frame for any students who maybe at the last minute are thinking, I guess I will do it?
Yes, there's like an add drop period where there's, I don't know the exact number of days where they can add, but up to the 14th day of classes, they can have schedule adjustments and drop. What's the add?
The ad.
Not.
The ad period is really the first 3 days of next week without instructor permission. Then they can get instructor permission through the rest of the week, for the first 2 weeks. It gets harder every day that goes past to get students into a course for these 16-week courses. But to Heather's point, we have 12-week courses that will start in mid-September and 8-week courses that will start in mid-October.
Okay.
So we'll work with most of those students to get into the 12 and 8-week courses,
Okay,
not 16. Because to come in a week late is not good for their success.
right. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
If there are no further questions, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Lisa Malig for the HLC quarterly update. She's our accreditation liaison officer.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No, you can.
You whispered on purpose, right?
I did, just for you. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time, hopefully only a few minutes for you here. I just have a quick few updates for you on where we are in working with the institutional accreditor, HLC. So a few reminders on some important dates that are coming up for the institution and for all of us here. So our assurance argument, and for those of you who may or may not know, that is the argument that we're writing for our accreditors in response to the criteria for accreditation. That basically is an argument that says we are meeting these criteria. It's part of the comprehensive review that we are doing, which happens once technically every 10 years, although we do a mid-cycle in between that. We are in our 10-year review. And so this is our opportunity to show how we meet the criteria for quality as an institution of higher education. And our lock date on that is September 16th. It feels like it's creeping up very fast for us. And our site visit, so that's another part of that comprehensive review, is on October 14th and 15th. I know the last time I talked to you, we kind of talked about what that meant, and we had a little concern about that being during a holiday. So I will remind you that the site visit team, at least the chair, will want to meet with board members, and that will probably be scheduled, I believe, on the 15th, the morning of the 15th. We talked about that. So you don't have to worry about meeting with them on a holiday. So that's been taken care of. And then the last thing is that we will have preparation for the Board of Trustees, and I believe that we'll be having that at the next Committee of the Whole meeting, so you'll be getting more information about that. In preparation for this comprehensive review, we have had a steering committee that's been meeting for the last 4+ years, actually, and we had criterion subcommittees. We did disband those criterion subcommittees at the end of the spring because we've been working with those committees for almost 3 years now, and we've worked on developing the arguments for that assurance argument, but now we've created 3 new subcommittees just to focus on getting prepared for this last stretch. So we have a writing subcommittee. Guess what they're doing? They're writing the assurance argument. We have an engagement committee, and they're really trying to plan as much as we possibly can ways to get the faculty, staff, and students involved in preparing for having this team on campus, so that if they come to a session, they know how to engage with the site visit team. If they're stopped by a member of the site visit team and asked a question, they know how to interact with them, and that they just know what's happening on campus while that site visit team is here. And then at the recommendation of members of the quality workshop that we attended, we formed a site visit committee too. So they're handling all the kind of nuts and bolts of making sure that our site visit team is welcome here, that they have kind of tour guides to take them from here and there, and that they have any kind of hospitality that they need to make sure that they have hotel arrangements and things like that while they're here. So that's where we are in preparing for the site visit. And then the last thing I wanted to update you on is that we are still in the HLC Assessment Academy team. Thank you. And this is actually our last year of that project, too. So that worked out really nicely, that it kind of coincides with our affirmation project. Probably, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, is that we do have a team that has been working on that, and they will have to present the results 2 days right after the site visit. So we might as well get everything done right that week, right? So on the 16th and the 17th, they'll be attending an HLC session and presenting our results from the last 5 years of our project. And we will be then submitting a report, as you can see, and talking about how we plan to sustain the work that we have been doing. And hopefully we will be sharing that out with a larger HLC community through some kind of presentation at the HLC annual conference, if it gets accepted. That's our goal. So with that, I will open it up for any questions that you may have about either the project or about the visit that's upcoming in October.
Do you see any, Paul?
I just thank you for all your work on this the last 5 more years. So,
We've had a lot of great people working from across campus, and
I know.
thank you also for helping us with that, too.
Yeah, I haven't helped in a number of months. You'd see after I showed up for a couple, and you kind of went in your breakout, I didn't know where I fit in, and you and I talking about it. But I feel confident that, it's moving along, and I'm glad to. I was a proponent of doing it kind of as an ongoing thing, and I'm glad it kept on going, and it was a living, breathing process. But thank you for breathing life into it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. No question.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? If not, well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees. This afternoon, I bring to you 6 agreements for renewal from our school districts. They fall under 3 buckets. The first bucket is the dual and articulated credit. The second bucket is the running start IG agreements that we have. And the last bucket is the senior semester. I'm asking for your approval to have these agreements renewed so we could continue working with the school districts.
These are all renewals, there's nothing new in them, no changes?
No.
Just a rubber stamp renewal?
No. We just have one more school district, RPS 205. We'll bring that next month.
Are they going to come along?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any question, Paul?
Yeah, the only question I have is, and maybe I missed it, and I admit that I may have, but I don't remember the whole agreement signed being in the agenda package before. I mean, it's very interesting to see the whole list of classes and the like, so I appreciate that. So, I mean, I'm looking at different,
Gloria?
Is there a reason why RPS is always a little bit delayed?
No, this one,
I mean, it seems like every time we discuss it, it's like we're waiting for them.
no, this time it was the person who was supposed to sign was on vacation, and they came back out this week, and Anne requires the documents last week to be able to send to you. So
They
we had
start
to-
later, too.
Yeah.
That might be part of it. Like, they're still way in summer mode, whereas in a lot of these schools, start tomorrow or next week.
I see. Okay. Thank
You don't have to cover for them, you know.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much. Now we got the finance, yes, the finance discussion. Paul?
I pretty much asked all my finance questions in the other report, so I'm just going to hand it off to Ellen and have her do her reports. I would just ask that people wait until, in the first one, you're going to do purchase report A and then purchase report B.
Correct.
So wait till after she completes A to ask A questions and B to ask B questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So first, we have Purchase Report A, which is FY25 amendments. This is for CDW government. It's an increase of $10,300 for a total of $75,300. This is for the renewal of the Barracuda Energized Spam Firewall, email security gateway for cloud services. And what has occurred is when the amount was initially approved by the board in June with all the other blanket purchase orders, the annual license cost could not have been quoted until July, and there was an increase of $1.10 per user. Is there any questions? Okay, we'll move on to Purchase Report B, FY25 purchases. First, we have Helm Service for $52,800. This is for electrical services to safely remove the mercury stats, ballast, and PCB transformers from the current buildings located at the downtown West Campus location. Item B is for Honor Lock of $72,000. This is for a 3-year contract for the online proctoring software and services that the online learning department uses. The $72,000 is the cost for all 3 years of the contract, so it is not a per-year cost. Item C is Morrow Brothers Ford for $55,560. This is for a new 2025 Ford Police Inceptor. This vehicle will replace an aging 2013 vehicle that has high mileage on it. If we go to item D, this is to Northern Illinois Service Company for $914,929. This expense is for the demolition of the 3 existing buildings at the downtown West Campus. This project was bid as 24-19, and there were 5 responses received that you can see in the report.
That's too bad. Too bad a big project like that wasn't lower in the lower areas or local areas. This is
Yeah.
Indiana.
Yeah, the lowest is Northern Illinois Service Company in Rockford.
That's the second one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I missed that too, Bob. I was reading it earlier today, and I got like, wait a minute, you know,
Yeah.
and I missed it. I missed it too, so.
It's okay.
All right, thank you.
Item
Sorry.
Item E is $51,000. This is for Tesla. This is to purchase a new Tesla Model Y for the automotive program. The Model Y is the most purchased e-vehicle in the United States, and by including this vehicle in the curriculum, the college ensures that students will have hands-on experience. This purchase will be paid by the Rev Up EV grant. And the final item on Report B is Helm Electric Facility Solution for $502,252. This is for upgrades to the lighting in the Stenstrom Student Center. The lighting fixtures in that building are currently 23 years old, and many are failing. Replacement fixtures are no longer available. And this project will replace the existing lighting fixtures with more efficient LED technology. Bid 24-18 received 2 responses. And just to let you know, the engineering firm IMEG that we are working with will be applying for programs to receive funds back for this lighting project. Are there any questions?
Paul?
I have a question on purchase report B, item B. I question the exemption used to, it doesn't look like that went out for bid. You used an exemption for honor lock, correct?
Can you scroll back up to the? Yes, we used an exemption.
Yeah, I think that's a very liberal application of that exemption to an online hosted system. That exemption is typically used for on-site data processing integrated with communication equipment and interconnect software and the like, phone systems and data systems and the like, not necessarily an online hosted system. So I give you a couple options. Create a purchase report B and pull that honor lock out and put it into it, because I will not support purchase report B with honor lock in there. I can't vote for that if we use that exemption for that one. I'd have to vote against it, so.
So you want to pull that one out?
I want to pull that out and create a separate one just for that, so I can vote against it, but vote for everything else, so.
I think that's easy enough to do, yes?
Yes. Because it's not agenda, we don't have to wait until the board meeting. We could pull it out in advance, correct?
Yeah, I would do it in advance. Just
We
so
don't have to make a motion.
Right, we won't have to make a motion, right.
No, we don't need a motion.
Because we know it's with just a red line version of it, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, right.
Because I've looked at this section very closely in the last few months for different projects, and online hosted stuff never was really the intent of it, so.
Okay. Any other comments on the purchase report?
We'll make 3 purchase reports.
We'll move on then.
Wait,
Sorry, Gloria?
I just want to make a quick comment on purchase report B here for the lighting upgrade. I just want to say, you know, I'm so glad we're catching up. It took us 23 years to get to it. And I'm just hoping we don't do that too often, that we could move faster on some of these other things. So just pull some money out of the air or something, so.
Paul, got a comment?
Well, I'd like
you.
to speak to that, and maybe Rick could. Some time ago, the board approved either a tool or a system of software system to help you manage these types of resources, keep track of them, and plan for capital outlays for improvement and the like. Is that correct?
Yes, it's called Brightly.
Okay, so hopefully it won't take 23 years next time. It might take 13 years or something like that. But.
Okay, any other comments?
Right here. Yeah.
Yes, sir?
So is the Tesla car, I'm sorry, is it being just used to like just demonstrate what it looks like and then like the circuitry and all the components about that? Or is it more being driven or kind of in between of that for the students?
Microphone. Microphone.
Microphone.
Like part of the training?
Yeah, training or.
Yeah, that's being used for the students during instruction. So the instructor will instruct and demonstrate things on it, and the students will have to emulate and perfect the art of working on the vehicle.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And the fire team to put out the fire when a batteries go on fire. Yeah.
Any other comments? Moving on?
Okay, we'll move on
Report?
to cash and investment report. So operating cash and investments as of July 31st decreased by about $1 million to $94.2 million. There is no unusual activity to report during the month. It's the summer. And then capital funds increased in July by $233,000 to nearly $19.9 million. Are there any questions?
Questions, comments? Having none, move on. Next item?
Okay. The next item is a resolution calling for the Bond Issuance Notification Act public hearing for the working cash bonds not to exceed $14,700,000. This is required for the compliance with the Bond Issuance Notification Act to hold the public hearing. and to receive comments on the proposal to sell the bonds of Rock Valley College District, as Tammy mentioned in her presentation. The BINA hearing is set for September 24th, and notice will be published in the Rockford Register-Star. Notice is required to be published between 7 to 30 days before the date of the hearing, so we do have adequate time. Are there any questions?
So bonds are repaid via tax levy?
Correct.
And no taxpayers ever question new bonds being issued, right? Is that right?
This will
They
be
get
my
noticed,
first
but no one
time.
ever asks, right? Not that I'm asking that they should ask, but anyway, move on, please.
We'll move on. Also included in your package for information only was the quarterly purchase orders of $10,000 to $25,000 from April to June of 2024. So that is available for your review.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Hearing none, thank you very much, Ellen.
You're welcome.
We'll move on now to production.
Thank you.
Operations. Trustee Kennedy.
Yep, Rick Jenks to present the operations report, please.
Good evening, Board. The first item on the agenda for me tonight is the personnel report. You can see it's there. We have 2 appointments, a Michael Coons, who is going to be a new aviation maintenance technology instructor starting in the fall, and a Matthew Cole with automotive service technology instructor also starting in the fall. We have 1 departure, a dean of mathematics, who will be leaving August 15th. Any questions on the personnel report?
Nope.
The next item is in regards to the college bookstore. As the board was made aware several months ago, we advised that we were going out for a new, or looking for a new, I shouldn't say new, we were going out for an RFP on the bookstore. Our contract is currently going to expire the end July of 2025. So we had created a large committee, and we were going to look at both online, hybrid, or kind of a mixture of brick and mortar and a online scenario. There's a lot of schools that are doing a variety of things. Some are going strictly online. Some are doing a hybrid. Some are doing a brick and mortar with with a heavy internet presence. The hybrid would be like if we utilized a books, like a coffee shop or something, to kind of act like the bookstore and sell our merchandise and things of that nature. Or we could do an actual bookstore, but just have somebody who has a really heavy presence in the online world. So the committee met, we reviewed the RFPs. It was quite nice. We got a lot of responses, and I actually had to extend this out because of so many responses that we had gotten from vendors, and the team needed extra time to go through them to narrow it down and conduct interviews. It was a 17-member committee formed of people from faculty, staff, administration. We had people from student services, facility services, disability services, academic affairs, operations, online learning, biology, engineering, technology. Myself I was on it. Dr. Amanda Smith was on it. We also had Dr. Patrick Pyre on the committee. Oh, and Ellen Olson was on there too. Always got to have finance. I almost forgot you, Ellen. I'm sorry. So we used several scoring matrices and narrowed it down to 4 respondents who we came back and re-interviewed. Ultimately, the decision that the committee had to come to was whether or not we thought we could go to an online-only version of a bookstore. The committee discussed this, I'd say, in fairly great detail. And we came to the conclusion that we did not think that that would be the best interest for all of the students at Rock Valley College. Although there is a large segment of the student population that is very familiar with the internet, very familiar with purchasing books, and very, very familiar with all the things that go into having an online-only bookstore, there is also a segment that is not. And there is also a segment that doesn't have some of the abilities to have things shipped to their home because maybe they don't have a stable home. So we felt that it was in the best interest of all the students that we go with, we're calling it a hybrid, but it's basically a brick and mortar type establishment, but has a heavy online presence. We looked at all of the options, and the committee chose BibliU as the top respondent because they had that, call it hybrid model, but it's basically a brick and mortar entity, but had some new and interesting ways in their technology to make us more efficient, make our financial aid more efficient, make the way we input data into the systems more efficient, so that it will help improve our processes, saving us money and time, and improve the overall experience for the students. They're also willing to expend some funding to upgrade our current bookstore and I'll say remodel it so that we can bring in more merchandise, more things to sell, more RVC merchandise, clothing, and other items for the entire school. Does anybody have any questions about the entire process? And
So will the physical space be the same? It'll be just remodeled or something?
Well, the physical space will be the same, and they are have said that they will spend about $125,000 remodeling the inside,
Really?
making it more upbeat, more modern, things of that nature. They actually had a very good financial model. Nobody really understood the models except for Ellen, and she didn't tell us which one had the best model until we picked the one that we thought we liked the best. And the one that had the best financial model was BibliU, which is the one the group picked. So it just sort of worked out that way.
So where do you think they recover their investment then? Higher prices?
No, they're very efficient in some of their modeling and how they get the books shipped out.
No, I don't know. I don't buy that. They got to get it somewhere. They got to get it from higher prices, I would think. Paul?
That market is very competitive. I mean, I simply think if they could add another institution the size of ours, help us make a little bit more money, and then when other community colleges go looking around and saying, who would you use? BibliU. They were really easy to work with, and they helped us remodel our facility for sales. That would go a long way to increasing their footprint in the institutions. If we were a larger institution where we weren't connected to so many other, local community colleges, maybe not, but maybe they see an inroad here with all the community colleges stressed for budget and looking for solutions like this. Because still, even libraries, they're downsizing and going to online because just the physical footprint of having that in your space costs money. They know if we could keep it at the same size and help us remodel it and not necessarily expand it, but offer more online presence, that works out for the vendor and it works out for us. So
yeah, and they also have a model where we can start to shift more and more to online if we choose in the future. And the facts are, the more you put online, the less the cost is going to be, because it's less expensive to have the online version of it. But because they're kind of a hybrid model, it's still going to allow us, because they're heavy into that online presence, and they've got things so automated. The books come off the shelves, they're automatically sorted, they send them out. It's all streamlined, and so they have some real efficiencies. At least that's the way that it seemed for when they explained it to us.
And then correct me if I'm wrong, though, but isn't a current bookstore, didn't they provide us some type of revenue as well? So this is like getting back to what Paul was saying. It's very competitive. So it's not uncommon for them to provide us with something to get their footprint in the door. But it should be less expensive for our students, and that's the key factor. I'm assuming that they're going to gain some dollars off other items that's sold in there as well, besides the bookstore itself. So if they can encourage more people to purchase more items besides just the books, I'm assuming they'll start making their money back.
Right. I mean, I used to support printing companies that used to print those expensive, textbooks, and the people supplying the film and the chemistry to the printers used to give you the film or the chemistry if you bought one or the other for them, because they know then you're locked in for a period of time, and they're going to make their money by just expanding their footprint. It's really no different. Down the road, we'll probably expand our online footprint with a lower cost per book, but a higher revenue for the vendor. So,
In a couple areas that the BiblioUs and the e-campuses of the world, where they can save money and they can save students money, in particular, one example they gave is book revisions, right? Because you might have 5 book revisions, and they just change a couple of things here and there on a page or two. Well, if the faculty member is okay with it, BiblioU allows the faculty to go in there and, I think it's check a box or whatever, however the process is, and say, we'll take all these revisions, and then they'll offer 3 or 4 year old revisions at a fraction of the cost to the students, and they're still making money off of the book, but the student is saving a fair amount of money. So they have a lot of these things that they factor into their costs.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I would say for the fraction of the cost would be very beneficial from my perspective, but like a $200 book I'd use for like a few chapters would be greatly beneficial for other students coming down the road.
Yeah, and we'll continue to work with faculty and talk with them about ways that they can try and reduce those book costs, because we understand. We've seen the information, we've done the polling, so.
It's crazy.
Okay,
So
any other
this would be
questions,
just to allow us to negotiate with BiblioU for a contract,
Okay.
is what we're
Right.
requesting.
Okay, I
like
guess
it.
we got it. All right. All in agreement.
So the next item that is on the agenda is just an update on CL2, which is going to be a verbal update. I will tell you that the CDB, Capital Development Board, I guess I should say that out so people who don't know it, met today. There were 9 architects that were in the running. They have narrowed it down to 4. Apparently, I can't say who the 4 are, but they have narrowed it down to 4, and they will be meeting on August 26th to interview the 4 and select the final architect for the CL2 project. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So that is moving forward.
Okay.
And CDB
Questions?
seems to be very responsive.
Hearing none. Next item.
My final item is just the facilities event, and I basically just say school's starting again. There's a lot of things. All right, there's volleyball games, there's welcome week, there's all kinds of entities and things. Professional Staff Development Day is on the 3rd, so things are gearing back up again, and it's going to be exciting times.
Okay.
Any other
comments?
questions?
Any other questions, comments?
No, looks good. Thank
Just
you.
for the informational one, I see you're adding more than you're letting go. I mean, more are being added than are leaving, I should say,
Right.
which is a good sign, I think.
That's a good sign. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, good job.
So now, any other business, unfinished business, or new business?
Yes, yes, sir. I want to reiterate Professional Development Day. As Rick just said, it's on the September 3rd, I believe, Tuesday after Labor Day. Of course, trustees, we have plenary breakout sessions and things of that nature. You're more than welcome to come on campus to participate and listen to some of the different things that we're going to focus on this year. A lot of it focused on strategic plan and HLC visit as well, but a lot of the presentations will be from internal stakeholders.
So we get a schedule of all the different meetings?
Yes.
So we can, in case we want to pick and choose, or, you know?
Yes, we can provide you with a schedule of the day.
We should, yeah.
Or in case we got to go to lunch, you know, stop by.
Absolutely.
I would dare say if we didn't offer a meal in any of these things, Gloria may not
for the
show
food.
up. So please continue offering that.
Like students,
We
it's
work
better
for
with
food.
meals. It's better with meals.
We work for food.
Pizza.
Also, hopefully you're okay, Tracy. Also, reiterating Welcome Week. Semester is starting, so thank you for the ones that was able to volunteer as greeters and things of that nature. Fall semester, such a fun time to be on campus. If you get a chance to get on campus during the day, say hello to students. I just don't understand how people could walk on campus, especially at the beginning of the semester, and not say hello to a student. Say hello, and if you don't know how to answer a question, send them to the Student Center and the Welcome Desk, and we'll have somebody there. But for the first week, these first couple of days, we'll have greeters placed strategically throughout the campus that will be there to help students. And if you decide to be a greeter, there will be somebody to help you answer that question as well.
Okay.
All right?
Sounds good.
So thank you. I also want to give kudos. You know, I had a chance to watch Beauty and the Beast, and it was such a great production. If you didn't get a chance to see it, you just missed it. But kudos to Jennifer Thompson. I think you were the director, correct? Awesome. She did a marvelous job, had a strong team. She's right there, wave. So well done. And then Stars of Starlight is tonight. It's a fundraiser. Trustee Simpson, both or just
Henry.
Just Henry is
Olivia
participating.
was in it last year.
Olivia was in it last year?
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, if you want to stop over there and see what they're doing. Get a chance to see many of our stars perform once again. They do a great job, and you know, it's a great way to share in giving by helping out with the fundraisers, if you know what I mean.
Starts at 7.
So kudos to that. I also want to share that we made the ACCT News. Bourne & Co. was the industry partner that received the award for ICTA, and they shared it nationwide through ACCT. So you should have received that in your emails, but all trustees nationwide received that as well. So kudos once again. And the last thing I will share is I was at another meeting this morning, and Chairman Shirelli, Winnebago County, was sharing that they are establishing a rural transit system to help families in rural areas get to the area. So now they can use the a rural transit system to get to campus, so college students can use it, or for medical support, things of that nature. So he said that they'll probably have that in place within the next 2 months. So, and it's not through RMTD. It's a different company that they're using. But I told him how much I appreciated hearing that they were investing in companies to help with our rural population get to the city and to the main campus.
Did they say who they were working with?
I'll share that with you. Yes, I have that in the email. I can share it in a little bit. And I believe that
ends my updates.
Okay, thank you. Any other from the, I guess you don't, faculty don't do it. Can we have a motion to adjourn to closed session, please?
Motion to adjourn a closed session to discuss, one, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body per Section 2C5 in accordance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act.
Second.
Gorski.
Heck yeah.
Kudia.
Yes.
Kennedy, yes. Michaels.
Yes.
Simpson.
Yes.
Sotow.
Yes.
Trojan.
Yes. What do you need in,
I will, of course, Aaron Cassell, attorney, will be enclosed with Rick Jinks and Ellen Olson, and the name of the company was Reagan Mass Transit. He didn't hear me, but that's what we wanted.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody else.
is, you know, a hometown for Reagan, so.
Go for it.
We ready? Okay, next regular Board of Trustees meeting, August 27, 2024, at 5:15 PM. The meeting will be held in the PAR room 0214 in the Educational Resource ERC on the main campus. Next committee of the whole meeting, September 10, 2024, at 5:15 PM. The meeting will be held in the PAR room 0214 in the ERC on the main campus. Move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Oh.
It's Nico's hand.
All in favor? Can we do a voice vote on the adjourn?
Sure.
I believe.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. See you. Thank you all.
Dr. Steven.
How do we do?
So hard.
How do we do, Paul?
I think their preference is.